Hello again, you lovely Godot people. In this video, we're going to start work on our NPCs. Now we have bystanders, which I suppose are an NPC, but really they're more of a sort of an obstacle. We're going to make robots. Now this is the very beginning of the robots. We're going to tweak them later in the course, but let's talk about what I'm envisaging. Let's talk about what I'm thinking of. Do you know, I had trouble with saying that the first time I recorded this too. Our NPCs are going to be very, very simple. They're not going to be a hugely complicated AI agent. They're just going to move left and right, and they're going to use a raycast to figure out when they should fire. So we're going to cast an invisible line, and the player across that line will throw some food. And they're going to move in a very regular pattern. Think Space Invaders, or one of those shooting galleries at an arcade fair. Arcade fair? No, fairground. Whew. Think one of those shooting galleries at a fairground. There we go. So let's jump into Godot, and the first thing I need to do is take a look at these robots. So if we look under, where did I put it? I put it under Models. There we go. Under Robot, and we have the robot TSCN. So we have this lovely little robot scene. Don't worry too much about the ESCN. I'm going to open that anyway. That's the original file, but as you can see, it didn't fit properly. So I'm going to close that one. I'm going to work with the TSCN, but I don't need the spatial node. I just need the armature. So I'm going to save that. So right-click, Save Branch as Scene. I'm going to put it with the other characters, which is under Scenes, under Characters. I'll make a brand new folder here. I'm going to call it Robot. I'm going to call it Robot Armature.tscn, and there it goes. Great. Can close that. I don't need it now. Let's open the player and open the character. This is where we're going to be working. So what I want to do now is bring in the robot. So new inherited scene from character, and we call this robot. And I'm going to hide this mesh instance. I don't want that. And instead I'm going to instance in the robot armature. You will notice our robot is 4 meters high. I don't want a 4 meter high robot. I want a 2 meter high robot. So let's go to scale, 0.5 on all 3 axes. Oh, that's 0.2. Nice typing, Jan. There we go. Make sure you're doing that on the armature, not on the physics body, because again, changing the scale on the physics body has some very nasty results. All right, so we now have our robot, and to make this work properly, I'm going to go right-click and Editable Children, so I can access the animation player, because in here we have all the animations we need. Now currently, I just want robot running. That's going to be my go-to animation. It's set to loop. I'm going to set it to autoplay. And that's what a robot's going to look like. We will use some of the other animations later, but currently that's the one we're using. Okay, I'm going to minimize that. One more thing I want to do. I want to make sure that the robot fires when something crosses the raycast. That means I need a raycast. So let's bring that in. New scene, raycast, or new child scene rather. And we don't need the 3D, we need the 2D. I'm going to raise that above the floor. Let's bring that to roughly there. I don't need that to be precise. If we look at the raycast, a couple of things we need to remember. We need to enable the raycast. Remember, raycasts are always disabled by default. So we need to enable that. And where are we casting to? Right now we're casting 1 meter straight down. That's useless to us. I want to cast forward, which is the z-axis, and 50 meters should cover the entire level nicely. Okay, so we now have a robot that can fire. So I'm going to save this as robot. And let's go to level 1 and open up the template and put in another one of these organizing nodes. So brand new node. I'm just going to drag that up to there and call it robots. Save it. Level 1. And I'm going to instance in a robot. Make sure you're not doing the models. We want the characters. So there's our robot. And let's move you to the right place. So I'd say about here. Where is that? That's 13 meters on the X. I need to rotate it on the Y-axis, so negative 90 degrees on the Y. And it's sinking into the floor, isn't it? How's 0.5 meters up? That looks pretty good. Okay, now currently raycast doesn't do anything. So I'm going to save that again. And let's go into our robot and take a look at the script. We're using the character script. I don't want the character script. So I'm going to remove the script with this remove script button. Then I'm going to add a script. So to do that, where it says inherits kinematic body, I'm just going to click here, go back up to the character script. And then we have a brand new robot script that extends character. Okay. Now there isn't a signal that we can use for crosses raycast. So we're going to have to check this every frame. To do that, I'm going to put in a function for physics process. And all I need to do is say if raycast dot, and we have is colliding. We've used that before, back in Hoppy days. Colliding, there we go. And we can access anything in the character scene, so we can go try to fire. Now, I need to use try to fire. If I use fire, we're going to have a really interesting problem. In fact, you know what? I'm going to turn down my local volume, and I'm going to show you this interesting problem. Oh no! Sorry, I just like doing that. So try to fire is going to solve part of that problem. Now you'll notice it's firing because something is colliding with the raycast, and that something can be the scenery, it can be the bystanders. That's not much use to us. But if I put this in, at least we're only firing twice a second. We're constantly firing, which means we may as well just put it on a timer. So we need to fix that. Now there's a couple of ways we could do it, but I'm going to leave that as a challenge to you. So my challenge to you is to only fire at the player. Have the NPC's raycast only trigger try to fire when the player crosses the line. Now, as I said, there's a couple of ways you could do this. Give it a shot, pause the video, and when you come back, I'll show you my solution. And welcome back. Okay, two things we could do here. One, we could use the name of the collider, or the name of the thing it's colliding, right? So we could access the function get collider and get the name and all the rest of it. That's going to be tricky because right now we're using player as player M, but we might change that later. I don't really want to tie that down. I'd rather use collision layers, but collision layers is going to take a little bit more work. So there's a balancing act here, but I'm going to be using collision layers, which means I need to set them up. So project settings, input, not input map, lying, down to layer names, 3D physics. And we have a few things here, right? We have scenery. Reason I'm putting scenery as number 1 is our walls are all on that layer already, and it's going to be a pain to go through changing them all. Layer 2 is going to be player. Layer 3 is going to be robots. Layer 4 is going to be bystanders, with a capital B for consistency. And layer 5 is going to be food. We will probably have some furniture. Furniture is scenery, so I think that's fine. Okay, let's go change some things. So I'm going to go into the character scene. And just to keep this nice and consistent, I'm going to take these off and mask them with players, robots, bystanders, and foods. Okay, so save that. Now, let's go to the player scene, click on the kinematic body, go to the physics body, and it is a player. Okay, save that. What else do we need? Robots. Robots are of the class of robot. Great. Two more things we need. We need the bystander template and we need the food template. Now, because we're extending scenes or inheriting scenes, we just need to change the template, which is going to make things really easy. Our template for the bystander is bystander itself, which is bystander.tscn. So I'm going to go to the rigid body and change its layer. It is not a piece of scenery. It is a bystander. It is not... it does mask the scenery, it masks the players, the robots, and the food. Do we want them bumping into each other? I think we do. I think that'll be funny. Finally, let's do the projectiles. So under projectiles, projectile template, which is, again, spelt badly. And let's put you as food. Now, everything else is set to respond to it in the mask, but I may as well put it here. You can respond to everything. With that done, we can go into the robot, go to the raycast, and change what it detects. It only detects players. I had to fade there a little bit because I got a small bug that's happening. It should be working. If I go into this scene, you'll see that these collisions are working properly. But if I go into this one, you'll notice that both the player and the robot haven't updated their collisions. So I'm just going to press those. And this one isn't resetting to default. I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, it's part of the player scene. So let's go into the template scene and into the collision and reset those. And now when I go to level 1, that collision layer should be fine. So now when I press play, the robot's only going to fire if it can and if I cross the line. Now currently I can run up here, we'll fix that later. A couple of things I need to change. The first, the robot isn't moving. That makes this game really easy. So let's close this and go into our robot scene. Hello, robot scene. Okay, robots need a new animation player. And what I'm going to do is set an animation player that's going to control the translation. And I'm not going to call this movement or something like that because the robot already has an animation player in it. So I'll go over here. Movement could mean moving limbs or it could be moving position. So I'm going to call this translation animation. And I'm not going to create the animation in the base scene. I'm going to do it per instance. Now, normally I don't like creating things per instance, but it's going to make life much easier. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this robot to over here. Let's call that -8. And let's right click and do editable children. Great. Going down to translation animation, making a new animation called movement. And I'm going to say it's 4 seconds. It's going to take 4 seconds to go from one end and back. Or one end to the other and back. There we go. Let's do 1 second snaps. And click on the robot. I'm just going to make a key right there. 2 seconds in, we're going to be... there we go. Let's call you 3... Could you get to 3.5? Yeah, well, you're kind of bumping into the wall there, aren't you? I'm not really happy with that. Let's call it 3. And I'll make that key. I'm going to autoplay and loop, which means we're going to get this. Very Space Invaders, right? Now, I'm going to press play and make sure that that works, and then I'm going to look at adding a second one. Okay, we're starting to get some actual movement here. Now, what I'm not going to do is duplicate this robot, because if I duplicate this robot, it'll duplicate all these values, which means both robots will snap to this position. That's not ideal. Instead, I'm going to instance in a brand new robot. So let's instance in. And remember, I want this character robot. And rotate you 90 degrees, or negative 90 degrees on the Y. And let's move you back to a little further back. Yeah, I think a little further back. Okay, so you're going to start at 3. Now, this one is going to need editable children again. Go to this animation translation, or translation animation. New, movement, and same deal, right? So let's go to our robot. Let's say you're 16 meters on the X. Yeah, that's pretty good. And I'm going to make a brand new key. This is a 4 second animation that auto starts and loops with 1 second steps. And at 2 seconds, you should be over at -8 on the Z. Put a key in. Great. Now when I press play, not bad. Now I do notice that that second robot is too low, which isn't ideal. So let's go back to this one, and I'm going to click on the key, and on the y-axis I'm going to set this to 0.5, and this one to 0.5. There we go. So that's going to update both of those keys. There's only 2 keys, that's not too painful. Press play, and we now have the beginnings of a game. Now, currently we can still cross this line, but I'm more worried about coming to this back wall. Now, originally I thought, well, you know what, I'm just going to stop that from happening. You can't go any further back than that. But look how much of the space I've just locked off. So instead, let's do something fancy with this texture. I'm going to go to the walls thing. I'm going to open any one of these walls. So let's just open up the wall scene. And I care about this material. So let's click on the mesh. Click on the mesh again because I want this surface, and specifically surface 2. I click there. And if you scroll all the way down, you're going to find proximity and distance fade. I want distance fade. If you're far enough away, we can fade the material in. Let's go with pixel alpha. You could also go with pixel dither or object, but I like this one. And let's say at 5 meters, you see the full object, but when you're closer, you don't. You see how that works? So let's press play. And anything that uses that material, which is all of these walls and windows, will now fade if we're close enough. You can still see the windows. We could do the same thing with the windows if you wanted. And the shadows still exist, right? So I can see that there's a wall there. And I think that is a really nice touch. So, excellent work, and I'll see you in the next video.